how are you? Um, my name is Jason Haider, and today I'm going to be introducing a product to all of you that we're all very excited about at Xenco Medical. But first, I want to thank Anne-Marie, Chris, the entire team at VRARA. It's very exciting to share this new product with you, but it's also been incredibly exciting just to meet this great community of innovators and see all of the phenomenal work that's going on in this industry. So it's a very exciting time, and we're excited to share something that we've been working on as well. Next slide, please. So I want to start by talking about a problem that we've faced in our industry, which is the spinal implant industry. For years, we developed instruments, implants for intraoperative use, but from the feedback we received through our surgeon users, it was clear that communicating the complexities of spine surgery to a patient is a difficult endeavor. We received a lot of anecdotes from them, and what we heard was that historically, surgeons have relied on generic spine models, 2D image data sets such as X-rays, CT scans, and MRIs to explain a procedure to a patient. Next slide, please. So the use of 2D image data sets is limiting because I'm sure, as all of you can guess, they require the patient to conceptualize their spine in 3D without the requisite training to translate image slices into an anatomical model. The limitations of using generic spine models are self-evident by not reflecting the specific anatomy of that particular patient. Next slide, please. I want to talk about a very interesting study that came out in 2015 from UCSF that really highlights the impact comprehensive patient education can have on patient satisfaction, which is important to us because we've always been a patient-centric company. We tackled that with our implants, but we wanted to address the entire spectrum of care. So in that study titled "The Impact of a Patient Education Bundle on Neurosurgery Patient Satisfaction," it noted that under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2010, HCA-HPS has become one of the measures used to calculate value-based incentive payments in the hospital value-based purchasing program. This has led to increasing hospital and physician efforts to improve patient satisfaction. The paper also noted that as part of its procedure, a faculty and resident team at the University of California, San Francisco Department of Neurological Surgery developed and implemented a patient education bundle and assessed patient satisfaction as measured by HCA-HPS scores and a brief survey tailored to specific intervention, both before and after patient education bundle intervention. Next slide, please. So in that study, they noted that we believe that patient education strategies, as modeled in our bundle, can improve patients' hospital experiences and have a positive impact on physician performance scores and hospital ratings. It also noted that these interventions provided insight into an otherwise ambiguous and nerve-wracking process. And finally, it noted that we believe that similar patient education bundle interventions would benefit patients in other specialties and hospitals outside UCSF. This study was incredibly telling and really reinforce those anecdotes that we receive from our surgeon users, especially the part about this being a nerve-wracking process. And it really motivated us to try as hard as we could to address this with some kind of novel intervention. Next slide, please. Oh, perfect. Previous slide, please. Great. So yes, and next slide. Sorry, I jumped ahead there. Great. So another thing I wanted to note was in this process, our surgeons that were at teaching institutions noted that just as there's a little bit of a problem in the communication between surgeon and physician using traditional 2D data sets, there's also a gap that occurs during surgical training programs, specifically in grand rounds. Some of our surgeon users had mentioned that they would have loved to have the ability to really communicate a specific novel case that could be a learning experience, particularly deformities, like scoliosis, in a way that could walk the surgical trainees through the decision-making process of an actual patient, not just a generic case. So a much more engaging simulation of the surgical decision process is lacking in these reviews of previous surgeries as well. Next slide, please. A step in the right direction. So overall, and I think this audience particularly understands that virtual reality has made great inroads in the healthcare space and has done a tremendous service to education, especially in simulation. And what I wanted to share with you was a 2020 article that talked about the benefits of virtual reality in modeling case-specific pre-surgical discussion. So this is more for diagnostic use, but it shows that embracing these novel technologies and these breakthroughs in the surgical space has definitely reaped rewards. So in this study, they note that contemporary neurosurgical training institutions continue to push the boundaries of surgical education through the utilization of novel technologies. The study by Sugiyama and others prospectively investigates the effect of a virtual reality system in pre-surgical planning for cerebrovascular surgery. Interestingly, the authors found the VR system to assist in surgeons' understanding of patient-specific anatomy, and it helped with the development of a surgical strategy in most cases, with trainees rating the modality more useful than experts. Next slide, please. A step further. So based on those anecdotes that we received from our surgeon users and our own investigation of the landscape over several years, including virtual reality, generic models, we realized that there were two things we wanted to introduce to this process as we specifically tackled physician-patient communication and also surgical professor to surgical trainee education during grand rounds. And those two important pieces were patient specificity and light field displays. So according to our surgeon users, this gap really needed a shared holographic experience to be remedied. Specifically with grand rounds, some of our surgeons said that there were multiple people in the room, and when there was a barrier of headgear at times, it just made the process a little bit slower and difficult and not as intuitive. This was also the case with patients. So when a patient is shown their own anatomy, that can be transformative. But to have that without headgear in a light field display, there is a collaborative experience, and the physician can actually walk the patient through their anatomy as if their own spine is present with them as a third person. Next slide, please. So in order to tackle this, there's you can't see a couple of the pictures here, but I'll describe it for you. On the left side, there should be an array of different DICOM slices. So CT scans, I'm sure almost all of you are familiar with the way those look, but they essentially almost look like an ink blot. And what a physician will do is go through slide by slide, and as they navigate that, they get a sense for where they are in the anatomy. In the middle, there would be a volumetric reconstruction of those slides. And then on the far right, an image of a looking glass display, which is the light field display that we use for our solution, which is a really breakthrough technology that brings holographic experiences to the real world without the need for any kind of headgear. Next slide, please. So, yes, so again, oh, perfect. So, okay, so actually, this is great. We can see these images. If you could go back one slide now that so this was what I was describing. On the far left, you see that 2D DICOM data set. In the middle, you see a volumetric reconstruction in 3D. And on the far right, we have a looking glass display just to kind of convey all the different elements that we brought together into our solution. Next slide, please. Perfect. So for the first step, the patient-specific step, we used in our software an algorithm that's probably familiar with a lot of you, called a ray casting algorithm. Here, there are a couple traditional algorithms that people use. One is texture-based rendering, which is demonstrated here. Ray casting, basically taking a ray through the different pixels and creating a voxel grid. And that algorithm basically, with that voxel grid, creating a 3D reconstruction of something that would otherwise look like a 2D data set. Next slide, please. So now for the light field display component to our solution. So I wanted to bring a great study to everyone's attention called Measurement and Analysis of Arousal While Experiencing a Light Field Display Device. So this was a study that actually measured the difference in a user's arousal using actually a looking glass light field display versus traditional high definition monitors like an LG monitor, for instance. So in that study, the subject's behavior during each media experience was recorded for analysis, and the degree of arousal was measured by Face Reader, which was a software. As a result, the first image presented in the first order among the three kinds of images showed that there was a statistical difference in the degree of arousal between the three media. Next slide, please. And so in that study, they concluded, furthermore, in terms of education, a 3D image display can be used as an effective learning medium. And it really drove home the point that by bringing these really hyper-realistic reconstructions and displaying them in a holographic light field display, the looking glass display in this study, the user actually has a measurable difference in engagement and arousal, which was exactly what we were going for in really tackling these communication issues between surgeons and their patients and surgical professors and surgical trainees. We wanted part of our solution to really arouse attention and deepen learning. Next slide, please. So in order to really enhance this platform and create an engaging and immersive experience, we thought it would be important to incorporate all of our actual spinal implants into the software so that users could engage with patient-specific anatomy using holographic reconstructions of actual implants that are on the market today. So these are a range of spinal implants that are Xenco Medical, our company's current implants. And so what we did was we created virtual files of all of these implants and had them translated so that with the light field display and the voxel grid reconstruction of the anatomy, a user could simulate that surgery. And so the purpose of this was twofold. One was if a surgeon is educating their patient, and again, this multi-year development process had a range of surgeons who would give us their feedback because we wanted to make sure that this was a useful tool at the end of the day. They did communicate to us that they would find it incredibly helpful to not only be able to show a patient their actual anatomy in holographic space, but to give them examples of the kind of implants that could go into their anatomy and simulate that surgery for them. And especially with pediatric patients, and when this is, to quote that study, a nerve-wracking process. So these are the implants that we've incorporated. Next slide, please. And so finally, and I think this is such a great community of people here. You all understand that seeing VR, AR, XR in person is much more moving than seeing it through a 2D display like we are right now. But sorry if. But basically, I hope this gives you a sense for what our system looks like on a looking glass display. So what you're seeing here on the left is an actual patient spine that's reconstructed in holographic space, our implant, and also an air controller that's modeled after one of our actual pedicle screw drivers with buttons to allow the user to not only place pedicle screws, inner bodies, plates, rods, but the entire gamut of our product portfolio. But that I mean, even on a 2D display, I think you get a sense for the richness and hyper-realistic quality of that. And I think, there's a lot to be said about the Looking Glass 8K display and its ability to really convey realism. Next slide, please. So here, what you have is this should, it's showing as an image, but it should be a GIF that rotates a little, but I think, you can still get a sense for the depth that this display shows. But essentially, if I could describe it in words, you get a patient's anatomy suspended in air with the ability to simulate the surgery with all of our implants with tools that are designed to look and feel just like our actual surgical instruments. And so the goal is to give patients and surgical trainees a hyper-realistic sense for previous and potentially future cases. Oh, perfect. So the video is showing now. So you can see as we turn it, the real depth there. And this is all glasses free. So you can have 6, 7, 8 people all looking at this together, talking, communicating, adding implants simultaneously, and making it as collaborative as possible. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there's a holographic library of all of our spinal implants built into HoloMedX, as well as the ability to instantly translate 2D imaging data sets from CT and MRI scans into holographic anatomy. And again, this gives surgeons the ability to simulate an entire surgery, and most importantly for us, with patient specificity. And I think we're incredibly excited to get feedback once we begin rolling this out. Next slide, please. And so again, you get a little bit of a sense for the realism by looking at it on this 2D display, but seeing it in person is something entirely profoundly different, but in a way it's almost good to leave some things for future dates. But like I mentioned, entire groups of users can experience hyper-realistic holographic anatomy and the virtual implants together without the barrier of headgear. And by allowing holographic content to be viewed with the naked eye without the need for glasses, surgeons can simulate procedures, educate patients and surgical trainees as if they were interacting with the patient's actual anatomy. And so as we, this is our, our unveiling of this. So we have a couple institutions in California, some teaching institutions that we will be deploying these at in the coming weeks. And what our model will be initially is we will have the Looking Glass 15.6-inch displays as well as the 8K. And what we are looking to do is using the 8K for grand rounds, for cases where there are surgical trainees and they are going over complex deformity cases and simulating the decision-making process, and using the 15.6-inch displays largely to put into exam rooms, and so that we can populate as many exam rooms as possible with these, get that feedback, and continue to build out this experience. But we're very excited, and it really is a bringing together of multiple technologies that have been developed independently, which I think is always the most exciting thing to do, is bringing different fields together and really creating a bridge. And that's what we hope we've done with HoloMedX, and we're very excited to have shared this with you, and we look forward to to getting some of these use cases, some data, and creating some case studies around this to really see what the impact is and how we can improve this moving forward. Next slide, please. So here again, you see you get a sense with this video of the depth, and I think that even with this, you can get a sense for the suspension of anatomy in air. And as I mentioned, our air controllers are modeled after our instruments to simulate the surgery and create a profoundly immersive educational experience. And this remote interaction with the holographic content is really designed to create as intuitive an experience as possible. And I think that it's going to be particularly exciting not only to hear about the extent to which this enhances surgical training specifically in deformity complex cases, but also in patient satisfaction. So we do hope to replicate a study like the one I mentioned earlier that was looking at the patient satisfaction scores. And so we will be monitoring that and seeing how a patient's overall satisfaction with a procedure, with that experience, is affected by them going into a procedure, seeing their own anatomy in holographic space, seeing a simulation with implants that would be used by their surgeon, and really seeing if that ultimately may even help with recovery. There is a psychological aspect to some of these things and a motivation that goes along with patients really being brought along and invested in the entire journey. So we're very excited by that. Next slide, please. And so that's really the whole unveiling, and we're very excited to roll this out, to really get that feedback from the field, and hopefully share that with you next year and in different media, but really see how this impacts our teaching institutions as well as our private practice surgeons and the way they communicate with their patients. We're very excited about the advancements that have been made in light field displays. We're very excited to couple that with great software and bridge that with our own implant. So it's been a very exciting journey for us. We're excited to share it with you, and we look forward to seeing what the surgeons and patients say when they get a chance to experience it. So thank you.